Hello folks, welcome back to the channel. I'm sorry I've been away for, well, approximately a week, I think it is. I was taking a little break after the Maratona, not just from videos, I actually took a break as well from riding a little bit as well, because sometimes you feel like you need to, don't you? And it's middle of the season now, well, kind of. I mean, technically my season doesn't finish until like October the 31st, but then saying that, I do end up doing some cyclocross as well. So, I mean, does it really ever finish? But I thought I would round off the Maratona series and the videos. Of course, there was a couple of videos made in the week leading up to the actual event. But I'm heading off to do the Tour de Mont Blanc, which is a massive one-day event this weekend in, around Mont Blanc, 3 countries, and it's a huge amount of climbing in about 300 to 320 kilometers. Huge day. It's probably going to be one of the most challenging days that I'm going to have on the bike that I've ever had on the bike. So to kind of wrap up the Maratona and to kind of set the stage for that, I just want to talk a little bit about the Maratona effort itself. And this is a little bit inspired, for one, because I think it's one of my greatest ever performances, like over this kind of time period. So around about 5 hours, 4.5, 5 hours, in terms of like normalized power. I can't really think off the top of my head, and I've done a little bit of looking, and there's not actually that many races that I've done where my normalized power has been this high for 5 hours. The only ones I can think of are potentially like a stage of the Ampos Ras in Ireland, or Ross, stage of maybe the Volta Portugal, a stage of maybe the Tour of Japan, the Queen stage, the one that goes around the Kirin circuit. I've had a look, but they're all roughly in this ballpark. So, like, to give you a little bit of perspective, those are kind of, quite high level races, UCI level races. And although I wasn't in the front group in the Maratona and I was chasing all day, obviously the power distribution was different. So, looking at the zone distribution, it's actually not going to come up, but like obviously I didn't spend much time above zone 4. If you watch the video, I think I spent about an hour an hour in zone 4 in total, and about 2.5 hours in zone 3. So obviously in a road race, the power is going to be a lot more variable, but in terms of like normalized power, in terms of elevation, this is definitely like the best I've performed over this sort of distance and duration. So looking at the comments on that video, a lot of you want me to go back next year and see if I can start in the front pen and see if I can ride in that front group with Vincenzo Nibali and all the others. We'll see. It's definitely not off my list. I mean, it was a good day. If I was in that front group, might have played it a little bit differently, but I did the best I could, and I was very happy with the effort. Looking at the data over here, it was worth 26 beers, which I definitely didn't replenish, or 32 wines, or 16 pina coladas. So 136k, 4 hours, 43 minutes, at just over 4,000 meters elevation, 286 watts normalized, just shy of 300 TSS. And yeah, my FTP is pretty much up to date there. My weight is hovering around that region as well. So yeah, I mean that's a really good overview of the ride. And I just want to then draw your attention to, hopefully you can see this, I'm just double checking. Yeah, so my peak powers over here on the left hand side, and we're just gonna change that to peak normalized, and we'll have a look at where my best powers came. And some of it might surprise you, some of it might not surprise you. So in the video I said I want to attack the Passo João as best as possible, and I did. The first 20 minutes of that climb was 320 watts, 5.3 watts per kilo, give or take. And then my peak 30 minute actually came again another 10 minutes on. So in that first 30 minutes of the Paso Jiao, it was a very well-paced climb. Heart rate in the 160s, not like too high. I probably had a little bit left in me, but when you get up to elevation and everything, like you're getting up to 2,200 meters there, like everything feels harder anyway. So 160 didn't feel flat out, but it certainly felt like sort of 150 does at sea level, if that makes any sense. Those of you that have ridden at altitude or managed to not just ride at altitude, but like, you know, do a big effort at altitude as well, I think you'll understand like the difference that it makes. So I started to fade a little bit towards the end of the Jiao, but it wasn't anything too significant. I was actually having like a little bit of like lower back like soreness for that last 10 minutes, and mentally it was just fatiguing me. So hence why the last 10 minutes of the Jiao was actually a little bit down on, say, the first 10 minutes. But needless to say, it was still brilliant. And then my last climb was also like really good, basically matching the power I did on the Podoi, almost watt for watt. 157 beats per minute average there, 164 max, and 160 average, 165 max, with a little bit of a dip in between. So obviously you can see the heart rate drift there. But I want to draw your attention to the hilliest, or I'm not going to say the hilliest, but the most condensed section of the course, which is this kind of first, let's call it the first 2 hours, give or take. And I knew that my normalized power would be at its highest here. So we top out of this climb here, for example, my normalized power is 293 watts for that first hour and 45 minutes. And that's a lot of work. Like, you know, obviously the higher the power, the more energy you're producing, the more you're burning, and therefore the more you need to take on. My nutrition for the day was like really, really well planned and worked out very well. Couldn't really have changed much other than maybe had more bottles later on in the event, because it was getting more and more difficult to eat because of, you know, how much you were climbing really. And so relying on liquid would have been, you know, a better strategy, which is something that we'll think about at the Tour de Mont Blanc. But that's a whole different ball game potentially. So looking at this first section, I knew that I wanted to get in like as much energy as I could, because I'm burning so much in this first half. Because if you look at, say, you know, this section here, this hour, my normalist power is 271, so it's a little bit lower. And then this last section, 292. So this is what I meant by I wanted to be able to perform throughout the whole event, and I didn't want to be suffering. I didn't want to be slowing down at any point. I wanted to be able to pretty much evenly spread my energy throughout the event. So again, the first hour, 296 watts normalized. The first hour and a half, 295 watts normalized. And then, like I said, the first 2 hours, give or take, because of the descent, you're getting close to 290 watt normalized again. So I've done this in races in the past, you know, 290, 300 watts normalized for 2 hours, you know, but if I do that in a race, I know that it's been a very hard start to the race. You know, over the last, 12, 15 years I've been racing, I know what's hard, what's sustainable, and what's like really right on my limit. And I know that 300 watts for 2 hours normalized is a pretty deep effort. And obviously at my weight, yes, of course, but like just in general. And then to be able to then use this section off the Campolongo to recover, and you might have been in the same situation. You may have looked at this Dolomites, the Maratona route, and you may have been thinking to yourself, like, where can I save energy? And to be honest, the only real place you can save energy and dial it back a little bit is on this section. My actual power for this section here before this climb, because this climb was pretty gnarly right here. I'm getting up to 325 watts for 10 or for 8 minutes. So it kind of skews it a little bit, but certainly the descent here to the bottom of that one, where it's a half an hour stint at 236 watts, that's my only place really on the whole event where I've gone, a decent length of time, because this descent here is only 11 minutes. This descent here, I'm kind of pushing down near the bottom, so it's not really recovering. It's still 200 watts for 16 minutes. So this was the only bit. So if you're looking at this event next year, this is your section where you can potentially eat more and also recover more, i.e. do less power. So I did what I said I would do and invest a lot over this first 2 hours, hour and a half. But this is where I thought it warrants a video to explain just how the day really panned out, because it doesn't really come across at the video. But it shows just how well I finished, because that last hour and a half, potentially last 2 hours, was 292 watts normalized, and that first 2 hours was 290 watts normalized as well. And it's a kind of a different type of effort as well, because you're going uphill for 37 minutes, and then you're going up this climb here, the Valparola, for 31 minutes, 32 minutes, whereas the longest climb in this first half was the Podoi, which for me was 28 minutes. So to be able to hold things together on longer climbs is obviously more difficult, and because they came later in the day, it makes it a little bit more difficult as well. But that's something that I didn't expect I would be able to do, and hence why I was quite surprised when I looked back at it afterwards. When I sat down and looked at it, I was quite surprised that I was capable of not really fading. And this actual final climb, I set a top 10 on Strava, which was faster than anybody else on the day by approximately 30 seconds, which is not really a lot over a 32-minute climb. But in terms of finishing strong, then it's certainly something that I can learn from, and try and replicate in the future. Once it's in your locker once, potentially you can be able to do it again. So looking at the last little bit, then we had the final little climb, which was a real stinger. That's of course where we started there, La Villa, and this was the real steep climb, which required about 430 watts for a minute and 15. And as you can see, 300 meters at 13%, but the steepest section being the 17% for about 100 meters there through the crowd. And then the finish, again, I finished quite well. So this is incredibly positive. Like the last 6 minutes at 320 watts. Different kettle of fish if you're in the front group. Of course, you can start to play games and start to sprint. Would I have had anything left if I had to do a sprint effort? That's the other thing. But certainly something to think about next year. But Tour de Mont Blanc this weekend, huge day. I'm going to see, I don't think I've got the route saved, so I was going to show it to you. But yeah, needless to say, it's climbs like the Jiao, but like longer, like hour-long climbs, up to the same type of elevation, so over 2,000 meters, but you're starting from a lower elevation. So we're going to have like lots of weather changes to deal with as well. Heat, it might be cool at the top, but it'll be boiling on the, in the basin, in the descent. So yeah, it's going to be a real challenge. I'm looking forward to it though. I'm really, really looking forward to it after what I've been capable of doing at the Dragon Ride, which was, 9 hours. And this as well, which was 4.5 hours, 5 hours. So hopefully I can, maintain this mental freshness and this motivation for this weekend. So hope you're looking forward to that as much as I am. And I will see you then.